Yesterday evening, it was confirmed that a bomb threat was made on the home of the Taoiseach Simon Harris. An unknown person rang the Samaritans helpline and said a bomb had been placed at the house of Mr. Harris, and they also gave a code word. No suspect device was found when Gardaí rushed to the scene. Mr. Harris's wife and children were at home at the time. Joining me now is Jennifer Carroll McNeill, Fine Gael TD for Dún Laoghaire and Minister of State with responsibility for EU affairs and defence. It isn't the first of these kind of bomb threats that we have seen against a serving cabinet member. Nonetheless, still shocking, Jennifer.
Absolutely shocking, and the bomb threats against cabinet members themselves, but cabinet members with young families in the house at this time. And the Taoiseach has been Taoiseach now for 11 weeks, 12 weeks, and this is the third such serious event in relation to his family home. This is not protest. These are attacks on a man's private life, and the same thing has happened to Helen McEntee, who has, I think, endured it twice, again with a small family. This is not tolerable in Irish society. It is not protest. It is not representative of the democratic process. And it is designed, there's no point in saying, oh gosh, isn't it wonderful there was no actual device there. This is designed to intimidate and to frighten a family and to frighten all of the people connected to a family. Very young children, the people who care for the children, the extended family, and it is simply unacceptable.
Can I ask, was it not ever thus? I mean, there was a time when the Taoiseach used to be followed by an armed detective and a subsequent set of a car full of armed detectives because of a constant real threat to their lives. So does this not to some extent go with the job?
I can't agree that it goes with the job. We have one of the most connected political systems where the Taoiseach can walk down the street, where he can live in his own town in Greystones, where he has lived for his whole life, where he has been elected time and time again by his own community. It is not acceptable, and we can't justify it away in any sense. Yes, every head of government, every head of state needs additional security. There's no question about that. But what you were talking about is the repeated targeting of a family home. And that is very distinct and different. And it reflects the toxicity in Irish politics that has emerged, particularly since 2020, and that every politician is feeling. It runs the risk of legitimising this form of activity, perhaps not against the Taoiseach, but perhaps people again who don't have protection, whether it's a TD, whether it's a councillor. This is the frequency with which it's happening, and the way that we react to it and the way that we respond to it informs what will happen next. And that we must be very, very clear that this is totally unacceptable. It does not come with the job. This is a man and a cabinet, but Taoiseach in particular, who is giving every waking hour that he has, and probably most of what he's sleeping, dreaming about at night, to the service of the state and trying to protect the people of Ireland and develop the state, the Irish state. We want people to be involved in politics. It is a wonderful privilege to represent your community, but family comes first. And the attacks that have happened on cabinet members and their family homes, Taoiseach, Helen McEntee, Roderick O'Gorman, but the Taoiseach and Helen McEntee in particular, because of their very young children, we just simply cannot legitimise this in any way or wish it away or say that it was, that it was ever thus. It's simply unacceptable, and we must state that again and again.
I was listening to Shane and Ciara discussing it this morning, and one of the things that they were talking about was obviously the death of representatives in the UK. But that thing of it is likely that something will happen here, and why would anybody go into politics and all that goes with that? In talking to your colleagues, both at ministerial level, within the parliamentary party, within the Dáil, is that a view that's shared with politicians and elected representatives, that somebody is going to get hurt?
I mean, it's hard for me to answer it because I don't want to give any legitimacy to that idea. But it is certainly an increasing fear, and it is a fear I think that was ably expressed by Noreen O'Sullivan, the Task Force on Politician Safety, who, while we were launching the report, and I was the ministerial member of that task force that worked for a year under her direction, under the Ceann Comhairle's direction, to try to find ways to improve politician safety. This has only happened since 2020, really, in the form that we are experiencing. And while that was happening, Prime Minister Fico was shot in close range 4 times by a man who had no previous criminal engagement, a man who we understand, you have to wonder that there's people who are politically motivated. There may be people with mental illnesses. There may be different scenarios in which attacks might occur. When you look at what happened in the UK, some of it was premeditated, some of it appeared to be more in the space of mental illness. But in either event, the impact on a politician who is doing a job, choosing to do that job to serve their community, is it's very difficult for other politicians to watch and to continue to see and to recognise the implications for their safety and the safety of their families, and to know the value of political participation and the value of serving communities, and to want to do that as opposed to want to work in the private sector or whatever it happens to be. Politicians work in politics to serve the community. We have an economy of full employment. They could all do something else, but they want to work to serve their community, and we have to protect that, and we have to protect people entering politics and make it a place where they want to come. So I don't want to give legitimacy to that idea, and yet, to be honest and to be fair and to reflect the reality, yes, politicians are deeply concerned. Multiple members of my parliamentary party and other parliamentary parties have been the subject of direct and indirect attacks. Many of those have gone to court, many of those have not gone to court, and politicians have had to, and they never complain about it. They continue, they turn up, they do their jobs, they go to local events, they turn up to the Dáil, and that because of course they do. Because of course they do. And the Taoiseach is in Brussels today. I'm here speaking to you from Brussels with him up this morning on to Brussels. He's got a heavy day of work now between now and God knows what time he'll finish tonight. And he just does that and gets on with his work as every other politician and every other councillor does right across the country.
Now, Jennifer Calmaclean, is there, and I do not wish in any way to minimise the shock and fear that something like this must have caused for the Taoiseach and his family, but is there any risk that we conflate things too much? That when you look at the actions that you have experienced, that Roderick O'Gorman has experienced, direct threats, direct intimidation is a very different thing, or is it to one unknown anonymous person picking up a phone and making an idle threat?
No, I'm sorry. I don't agree with that at all. Imagine your scenario, Anton. Imagine you in your house, or any person in their house with their young family. And the impact of it is that guards have to come and walk through the house and search the house. At what time of the day? When you're having tea time, when you're having your beans and toast, when you're having your bath. These are the normalities of family life. There's no way of distinguishing, what happened to me or what happened to Roderick O'Gorman from the intimidatory effect. To be honest with you, if I had to choose, I'd take what happened to me any day over what happened to the Taoiseach and his family yesterday. It's terrifying, and it's not terrifying for him who's at work and he's doing his job, and to see his family. And let me not make it too much about him. It is also about Helen McAtee, who's experienced this. It is also about Roderick O'Gorman. It is also about, I could name tens and twenties of politicians working day to day in Leinster House who don't come out and complain about it, but who are just getting on with their job, but who have had to deal with these different things happening again and again and again.
Text to say this is not protest, this is terrorism, plain and simple, yes. And it's disgusting. Another, love him or loathe him, agree with his politics or don't agree with his politics, but a person's family home, including our Taoiseach's, is not a legitimate target for protest or attack. Do we really want to walk down the road of the UK or the US here in Ireland, where our politicians have to walk under armed guard at every waking moment? That, of course, begs the question, Jennifer Calmaclean, what can be done to prevent this kind of thing?
We had a whole task force on that for a year, and Noreen O'Sullivan did excellent work around, and much of this is being fueled by social media and the hate and the toxicity that is driven through social media, and also through the conduct of some of our politics, where we don't, where people haven't informed their politics with basic civility. It feeds into online. It legitimizes a toxicity and a hate and a notion of a them and us, which has never been true in Irish politics. Because we have multi-seat constituencies. In Dún Laoghaire, I am one of 4 TDs. You can see me anywhere. I am totally there, connected. I'm in the playground, I'm in the shop, and the same in every other constituency. And that is one of the great strengths of Irish democracy, that we are so connected to each other, that the people's preferences are so accurately reflected through our electoral system, through our PRS-TV system. At the end of the day, there's only so much that the state can do to stop this without putting in significant security infrastructure around me or anybody else in politics. We don't want to do that. We certainly don't want to have to do that. There simply has to be a recognition that hate and toxicity on social media and by representatives generally, that it is known that it fuels this. It fuels the actions of the few. And let's be clear, it is the few, and they are few actions, but they have great impact. And that is very important and very strong. So if somebody, for example, tells me on live television that they're going to put manners on me, that fuels the hate and toxicity that is then directed to me on social media. These things matter. We can see them. My staff can see them in the messages that come, the private messages, the emails that come, the toxicity.
Are you saying that as an example, as a straw man, yes, or was that said to you?
Oh, of course it was said it to me. It was said it to me on Budget Day on live television by the Sinn Féin chief whip. These are the things that are said and then they're brushed over. But we can see the effect on social media. We can see the effect on our emails. We can see the effect more broadly because they contribute to what has become a more toxic politics. Now, Ireland isn't unique in that. That has happened across Europe. That has happened in the US, in the UK. That has happened largely because of efforts, of social media, a failure to regulate social media, an allowance by social media companies of things that are said by politicians that are completely untrue, even when they're brought to their attention, the failure to deal with the many, many reports that I and other politicians would make to social media companies. So all of this has been building and building and building since 2020 in particular, because I've been in politics for a long time and it wasn't there before. And we have all noticed it being different since that election and through COVID and the implications and the things that came out of that. So it is different and they all contribute to each other. And it is important that we, as we go into a general election period in Ireland, that we are deeply conscious of checking our sources, not believing everything on social media, not having, single transferable voices that amplify, telling us the things that we want to hear or that we vaguely agree with. Being conscious that, if somebody in government says something, it really has been fact checked, they are to believed because it is destroying our public discourse and our democracy.
Another text saying, disgraceful, the bomb alert at the home of our Taoiseach and his wife and young family. Hope the culprits can be caught and dealt with severely. This country needs to respond to those threats. Can we move on briefly to another issue, which is you, of course, in your remit as Minister of State with responsibility for EU affairs and defence. The latter word being interesting at the moment, defence. We see reports in the papers today suggesting that the morale in the defence forces is at an all-time low following the prosecution, conviction and not jailing of Private Cathal Crotty. Questions being asked about whether or not the culture in the defence forces is what it should be and whether or not enough is being done to make sure that people like Cathal Crotty are not serving members. What's your view?
I think I'm the first woman minister in the Department of Defence in 25 years, the second ever. A week and a half ago, I met about 30 women from the Defence Forces to talk about their experiences, their practical experiences, not just connected to sexual offences or any of that kind, but just their day-to-day practical experiences in the Defence Forces. Only 7% of our Defence Forces are female. There needs to be a complete culture reset where women are listened to. They're listened to in the Defence Forces on all of the issues that they raise. There needs to be a complete cultural reset from the men in the Defence Forces who are great men who want to stand up for women, that they do that actively, not passively or in a general way, but they actively support women and women's voices, both within the Defence Forces and outside the Defence Forces. There is a major cultural shift that needs to continue to happen. It has begun, but it needs to be significantly expedited, significantly increased. A major cultural shift that needs to happen in the Defence Forces. These are people who are serving these are overwhelmingly great people who are serving in our uniform, our national uniform, with weapons. And the notion that there would be people there with criminal convictions is simply astounding. Now, we are getting details in relation to that, but I expect to see a very strong response from the Defence Forces in relation to this, and the government is taking a very, very strong line in relation to it. But I cannot overstate the need for the Defence Forces to respond to the cultural changes that need to happen, and in particular, when women raise practical issues that need to happen to make their ability to stay in the Defence Forces easier, as particularly as they go through childbearing years, that they respond to the physical differences between men and women in the Defence Forces, and the particular pressures that women feel as being only 7% of the Defence Forces. Like I'm in the Dáil where it's 24% female. It's very overwhelmingly male. And yet look at that proportion versus the 7% of women in the Defence Forces and what that must feel like. Their voices have to be heard. And the women who raise concerns about serving members of the Defence Forces, such as Natasha O'Brien, who has done a phenomenal job. Imagine she had just gone home. Imagine she'd just gone home and said, Grant, at least I got the conviction and sure, okay, he didn't get a sentence, as is all too often the case, let me say in general terms, all too often the case in respect of violent offences against women, and hadn't made the stand that she had. Would we be seeing the same speed of cultural response? I certainly hope we would, but I'm not sure of it. And this, it cannot be stronger on this.
Jennifer, thank you very much. That's Jennifer Carroll McNeill, Fine Gael TD for Dún Laoghaire and Minister of State with responsibility for EU affairs and defence. And I should say on Taoiseach Simon Harris will be joining me on the Anton Savage Show over the weekend, 9 to 11 on Saturday, 10 to 12